Baby boomers.
I used to be with it.
Millennials.
Okay, boomer.
Generation X.
What's going on?
And Gen Z. What do they have in common? Not a lot, it turns out. But one thing they can agree on is that this is the political podcast they want to listen to. Welcome to Not My Generation, the political podcast that looks at political events, news, and happenings across the world and at home through a generational lens. Your hosts are Dr. Emily Stacy and Professor James Davenport, two political scientists from Rose State College. But the views expressed on this program are solely the views of the host and their guests and do not reflect the views of Rose State College, its administration, faculty, or students. Coming up on today's program.
They're not really conservative. They want power, and they'll do anything to get it. She has kicked this thing into another gear. She's now up in Michigan, and she's climbing everywhere.
Do we really believe that this enthusiasm now is a true path in this America for a Black woman to become the first female president of the United States?
Don't make any plans for late January, because you're going to be trying to get to the inauguration of the first African-American Indian woman president.
Woo, doggies, because you brought in the big guns today. And now, here are James and Emily. Good afternoon, Dr. Stacy.
Hi, James. How are you?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
I'm pretty excited.
I think you're very excited about our guest today.
Yeah, just a little bit, I think. I'm fangirling just a little bit.
Well, you know, as we like to say in Oklahoma, this is one of those woo doggies because you brought in the big guns today.
Wow. That was impressive.
Yeah, I can do Oklahoman every now and then. I still have enough roots there. But
don't judge us, sir. Don't judge us.
You brought in a guest that is, we are going to have a lot of time and we're going to learn a lot from, I think.
I'm very excited to welcome to the podcast Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. And let me just, give the bio. Yeah. So Attorney General Ellison was sworn in as Minnesota's Attorney General, 30th Attorney General on January 7th, 2019, after serving quite a long time, 2007 to 2019, as Minnesota's 5th Congressional District, Congressional or U.S. House Representatives official. And this man was just brilliant in Congress. He served with such integrity and dignity. He worked and championed various causes. He founded, for example, the Congressional Antitrust Caucus, the Consumer Justice Caucus, certainly a progressive caucus where he was co-chair. He has been kind of everywhere and within the Democratic National Party, or National Democratic Party, I guess I should say. I'm having word salad right now because I'm just so Twitter-pated. I really, really enjoy this man. He is brilliant and bright, and we are just so lucky that he made time for us today. So welcome, Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Oh, man. I'm so glad to be here, Professor Stacy. Thank you for having me. And Mr. Santiago and James, thank y'all both for doing the good work to make the podcast come off right. It's such a labor of justice and goodness. We appreciate all of y'all.
That's right. The first time we actually met each other was at an event here in Norman, Oklahoma, right? And the Attorney General asked the question to the audience, who here has a podcast? And of course, my hand shot up and he kind of singled me out. And so that's kind of how our conversation started.
Well, now, are we going to put him through our intro questions?
One. You can do the generational one, but that's it. Just one.
Can we do one more than just, can we do two?
I didn't prep him for these, so.
It's okay. All right. They're easy peasy questions.
Okay, we're going to do a couple of icebreaker questions, Attorney General. These are personal questions, so they should be easy to answer.
You got it.
So first question, we always ask every guest, are you millennial, Gen X, boomer, Gen Z? Where do you fall on the generational timeline?
You know what? I'm one of those people who doesn't fall neatly into either one because I'm born in the year of 1963, which, according to some people, is the last year of boomer and is the first year, in other people, is the first year of the next one, which is what is that one, Gen X or?
Gen X,
yes.
Yeah. So I think that I'm somewhere between the two of those.
I think in attitude, you are definitely a Gen Xer.
I was going to say, we'll happily adopt him.
Yeah, I think so.
Ignore the 63 thing as an official member of Gen X.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, right.
James just likes to have somebody else who is within Gen X on the podcast.
Yes.
I myself am a millennial, so he likes to feel superior in some way. What was the second question you wanted to ask him?
What are you currently reading, listening to, or watching?
Well, that is a wonderful question, because one of the things that I love to do is read books. And when I can't read them, I like listening to them. So let me tell you, books I'm reading right now. I'm reading a book called Conservatives Without Conscience. It's written by John Dean. And basically the book is saying, like, look, no matter what side of the political fence you sit on, there is conservatism with integrity. There's conservatism with honesty. Nothing wrong with valuing tradition. Nothing wrong with watching the family budget. Nothing wrong with, using the best ideas of the past and trying to make change in a way slow enough so that you can assess whether you're really making any change at all. Now, I happen to not consider myself a conservative. I would consider myself progressive. But I do respect, conservatives who have integrity. I was raised by one. What we have now are people who there's nothing particularly conservative about Trump. Not personally, not economically, not anything. He's sort of a strange political animal, because he's not particularly conservative, and yet he is what goes for conservatism in modern America. Conservatism says the government should leave people alone to make their own personal choices. He can't wait to get in your bedroom. He wants to tell you who to marry, how to dress, and how to pray in your family. He spent more money than anybody. He drove up the debt more than anyone. And then conservatives say, well, wait a minute, we want to definitely stand for the rule of law. Well, he put in judges that flipped 50-year precedents like Roe, precedents like Citizens United, precedents like, I can keep on going, 303 Creative. It has been American practice since at least mid-60s, and probably before that we have voting rights and everybody has them. But under he's appointed judges who flip them. He's gotten rid of our gun laws. Yeah, we have a Second Amendment, and as a gun owner, we have a Second Amendment. But he's gotten rid of. He's saying that Congress cannot protect people and states cannot protect people by requiring that there be things like background checks. And he said a bump stock is not a machine gun. Of course it is. I mean, you can say it's legal, but don't say it's not a machine gun. It operates just like one, in my view. And the thing is, Congress ought to at least be able to say, for health and safety reasons, you can regulate. Now, under the Heller decision in guns, all the Supreme Court said is that you have a private right to own the average gun in your average home, but Congress can make changes where and when appropriate. And that was an advance, because the Second Amendment says well-regulated militia. But what he's saying now is guns here, there, and everywhere, and the state cannot have any authority at all to try to protect citizens, even as we have somebody shooting at the president just last week. So he's not conservative. So I just read this. I'm reading this book called Conservatives Without Conscience, because I think that people like Trump give conservatism a bad name, when I don't think it really deserves one if you actually are a real conservative. Another book that I'm reading is Big Med. mega providers and the high cost of healthcare in America. Another book I just finished reading is Into the Bright Sunshine, Young Hubert Humphrey and the Fight for Civil Rights. So those are just a few books that I've read recently.
Very good.
Awesome.
I love it.
So, I consider myself a reformed conservative. That's probably would be actually libertarian is where I land, which means I'm going to go anywhere. But I agree. I totally agree on the idea that what passes for conservative today, when I was in my formative years and starting, which would have been during the Reagan presidency, has no relationship at all to conservatism of my youth and early years. And trying to pick up any coherent strands or thinking from them is just extremely difficult at this point in time.
They're all power motivated, no principle, in my view. But so you get people like Liz Cheney, who's like, look, I want lower taxes as much as anyone, but you can't hype a mob to go violently stop a Democratic election. That's sort of her red line. And what happens to her? She's thrown out. My goodness.
She's a pariah, unfortunately, to the party. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're not really conservative. They want power, and they'll do anything to get it. And yet a conservative, again, incremental change, tradition, respect for tradition. These are conservative ideas. And even the most liberal person has to admit that there is wisdom in, at least respecting the conservative position, even if you don't ultimately agree with it.
Or general compromise, correct? I mean, that's
right.
the idea of a democracy is that compromise and consensus.
Yeah, and it's not a bad idea that some folks are looking out for the budget, making sure we're not spending beyond what we got. Yes, it makes sense to me. I mean, work hard for yourself, all that. Now from a progressive standpoint, I say, yeah, we all want to work hard and we all should work hard. But, there are some people who are too old, too poor, and too sick, and the government should help them as what a compassionate society does. That's kind of where I'm coming from. And yet the conservative is, but we can't break the bank doing it. And so we have this, as you said, Professor, this discussion, which hopefully lands us all in the same plate and balances, fiscal responsibility with a compassionate society. That's how democracy should work.
I agree. So let's get into the questions, my friend. I am dying to know what your take is on what is going on within the Democratic Party, regarding Biden, the 2024 campaign. When did the tide turn? What's this? The last 2 weeks have felt like 100 years worth of politics, and I'm sure you are exhausted as I am. So I'm just curious, where do you stand?
Well, let me tell you, I was a 2-time Bernie Sanders guy.
Okay.
So when Biden got on, so we won in Nevada back a few years ago, and we thought that Bernie might have a shot at being president. And then we went into South Carolina and we got our backside handed to us, and it became clear that Joe Biden was going to be the president. So I'm like, look, okay, fine, y'all won. I'm riding with Biden. Let's do this. So I was not one of those calling for Biden to quit, because I thought that, it's not about Biden or Trump. It's about us. It's about our seniors having Social Security. It's about our kids having a future and a good education. It's about our farms. It's about our jobs. That's what it's about. Let's keep the focus on that. And so you guys are into personality. I'm not into personality, and so I'm into policy. So I was like, whatever. But I have to admit that, boy, oh boy, it feels like we went from dark to light with the switch. I mean, my goodness, when Taylor Swift and Beyonce team up to fundraise for Vice President Harris, that's powerful. When you're breaking the internet, because there was this white woman call the other night where they had like They had a gazillion people on the call, raise $8 million. I mean, it's really, the excitement is palpable, and there's no doubt that the Trump campaign was set up to beat Joe Biden, and it does not appear to be set up to beat Kamala Harris. And one of the things that really is interesting is that Trump, who's like an expert at getting headlines, I mean, this dude knows how to make people talk about him. Nobody's talking about him. They are talking about J.D. Vance, but they're not saying anything J.D. Vance wants him to say. They're kind of talking about how weird he is and how much he seems to not like women very much. And so the conversation is like all Harris, Even Fox News is talking about Harris. And so I think that the switch has been positive for Democrats. I think Republicans got to figure out what they're going to do because they seem to be in a world of hurt. Now, again, I'm definitely a Kamala supporter, but I got to admit she has kicked this thing into another gear. She's now up in Michigan, and she's climbing everywhere. You asked about where the turning point was. Well, I think the debate was clearly the turning point. I watched the debate and I thought to myself, my goodness. And some people were saying that we were lying, saying that Biden was in good enough shape to run for president. I'll just say to any of those who make that critique in good faith, I was in the room, small room. I was in a small room with Biden only a few months ago, and there were no more than around 7 or 8 people in the room. And he sounded perfectly fine to me. But on that debate, he didn't seem fine. He seemed confused and mumbly and not. And then that crazy thing about who can hit the golf ball further was strange. So I tell you, I'm glad. But I'll say this: Biden has lived his whole life doing public service. He was in the Senate at 29 years old. And then his wife died, his children were killed in the car accident or whatever the accident was. I'm not sure I know exactly how, but it was sudden and it was tragic. And then his other son dies of cancer. His other son is in a lot of trouble with the law. He's faced a lot of problems and somehow come through them. He actually had an aneurysm himself, came through it. This is a guy who's faced a lot of hard times and made it to the other side. So he must have thought, I can make it. I don't want to be a quitter. And it took him a few weeks to come to the conclusion that he needed to hand the baton over, but he got there, and it seemed like everything's much brighter now. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Let me ask, because you mentioned, so last night was pretty remarkable, and we've seen since, the kind of the decision for Biden to not run and to step down, et cetera, and Harris to eventually become, officially the nominee. But the heir apparent, there's been a lot of civic engagement, participation, a lot of, like you said, kind of a light switch, dark to light. And the last time that we saw this was probably 2008 with Obama. And so I'm curious, number one, do you believe that there is a path? I know that, fundraising is indicative, it is wonderful, but it doesn't always equal voter turnout. So do we really believe that this enthusiasm now is a true path in this America for a Black woman to become the first female president of the United States? And of course, for our listeners who do not know, I am a brown woman in Oklahoma. So I'm asking as a Black woman because I'm a little bit skeptical about the actual turnout for Harris. The enthusiasm is there. And before I let you answer, I will admit to the listeners that the last time that this happened in 2008, I swore up and down. This was the first time that I've ever been wrong, ever in my life, about politics. I swore up and down that there was no way America was going to elect Obama before Hillary Clinton. I was certain that they would elect a woman before they elected Obama. And I was dead wrong, honey. So I would be happily, I would be happy to be wrong in this instance as well. I'm just curious what your take is. Is there actually a path for her to become POTUS.
Don't make any plans for late January because you're going to be trying to get to the inauguration of the first African-American Indian woman president.
All right. Are you invited? Was that an invitation, Attorney General?
You know what? Why not? Right? Not, I mean, when I was in Congress, I used to be able to make those invitations. Now I'm going to be trying to get in there like anyone. But you can bet, Professor Stacy, I'll have you in mind when I'm pitching to get my own tickets.
All right, sir. I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to hold you to that.
You can. Absolutely. Let me tell you this. She's going to be the president. I'm telling you now.
All right. You heard it here first.
And I tell you this. If you really want to get some good entertainment, go to YouTube and look up July 2015, Keith Ellison predicts Trump. It's there. It is there. Where I was on George Stephanopoulos and I correctly said that Trump's going to get the nomination and be the president. Now, I didn't want that to happen, but he had the momentum and, he was moving and, look, Hillary Clinton, I think, is a, good American, but, were the Russians doing stuff they shouldn't have done? Probably. Was there misogyny going on? Probably, yeah.
Definitely.
Definitely? Okay, yeah, I'll even go definitely. But neither misogyny nor the Russians stopped her from setting foot into Wisconsin.
Yeah, fair enough, sir. Yes, absolutely.
They didn't say Hillary Clinton is forbidden from stepping into Michigan. How are you going to win and you don't even go? Look, I'm a black person and I was raised, and I'll tell any of my white friends, black friends, any friends, that I was raised to believe that if I wanted to get half as far, I had to work twice as hard. And I was just raised that way. I'm sorry, but that's what my parents told me. So what I'm saying is that if you're going to be the first woman president, shouldn't you make sure that you do twice as many visits as Trump, you do twice as much work as your opponent? Well, she didn't do half as much. I mean, Trump was running all over the place, doing anywhere he could get he was going into states doing rallies where it didn't even look like he was going to win. He did a rally in Minnesota and probably increased his turnout by 10 to 20,000 votes, end up losing by 44,000 votes. But what you would think, not statistically, he shouldn't be in Minnesota. He's not going to win Minnesota, but he showed up in Minnesota anyway. People discount Trump. And again, I am totally against what Trump stands for, but Trump does a number of things right. One thing he does is he's an active campaigner. Number two is he repeats the same message a lot. And repetition, people get it if you say it enough times. Kamala Harris is going to outwork Trump. Look at her. I mean, the woman doesn't stop. She is a ever-ready bunny, man. This woman is a hard worker and is going to move and groove. Now, Biden couldn't keep up with the pace. She can. She's incredibly energetic. Not only is she's not just going to be going to every rally, she's going to be dancing on stage. And so Trump needs to understand he's up against an active, tireless campaigner, somebody who could win in California, which is like running across the country. I mean, it's no joke to run in California, man. You got to be San Diego, LA, San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, and even maybe up there near Humboldt or something. That's a lot of real estate. And then you got to go to the Inland Empire. Campaigning all over California is a lot. She's used to it, and Trump's going up against somebody who can outmatch his energy and who has a better smile, who can definitely tear into his backside on all of his felonies, and is a former prosecutor herself. And anything bad he says about her is going to come across as unseemly.
Yeah, it's already been a little touch and go, right? The speaker has already had to come out and kind of warn his caucus to play fair and be respectful. Yeah.
They better do that for their own benefit, because here's the thing. We all know that our country has had a problem with accepting people who are brown, black, whatever. we were a slaveholding nation. Native American land, all that. We all know that history. But I'm going to tell you something about Americans in 2024. Most of them overwhelmingly don't like prejudice. I'm talking about white people too. I'm talking about everybody. They don't like it. It's offensive to them. And if you start saying stuff like she's a DEI hire, some people are going to say, is that a substitute for an N-word? Because it sounds kind of bad. How are you going to say the woman's not qualified? She was a DA, she was a state attorney general and a U.S. senator, and you're saying she's not qualified? What do you have to be qualified? As opposed to a guy who wrote a book that was kind of disingenuous in many ways, and I'm talking about J.D. Vance, by the way, and then the only reason he got to the Senate is Trump put him in there. So he's qualified? Or what about Trump, who's lost more money than he's ever earned? That's true. And so, he was born, by the time he was 8 years old, he was already a millionaire. Trump's not a successful businessman. He's gone bankrupt, borrowed all kind of money. He's qualified? I mean, my point is, if Kamala Harris is not qualified, nobody's qualified. So if you call her a DEI hire and say she didn't earn it, then what you're really saying is she's not pigmentally, if that's a word, qualified.
I'm not sure it's a word, but we'll look it up.
We'll get one of our English faculty on, and they can.
I like it though.
Yeah.
Well, let's make it. Let's just declare it to be a word. And so my point is, if you're saying that she's not qualified in the same way that Obama's not qualified or Keith Ellison's not qualified, what are you really saying? Any fair-minded person is going to say, well, look, you may not agree with her, and you may not want her to be the president, but you can't say she's not qualified. I mean, come on.
I think her biggest advantage is her opponent is this guy by the name of Donald Trump. And I do think, if people's concern, as was showing up in polling and such, was Biden's age and concern about that, if that was their main concern, then I think Harris certainly addresses that. And now Trump is the elderly candidate, right?
Yeah, he's the old man.
Which he hates.
And quite frankly, Trump has his own issues with remembering things correctly.
Sleeping in public.
Yeah. So I definitely think that the dynamic has seemed to have changed. I didn't think it would at first. I thought, okay, and I remember her 2020 campaign in the primary was not that. It was kind of lackluster.
It fizzled, yeah.
And I didn't expect, I'll be honest, I did not expect Democrats to kind of rally around Kamala Harris.
Not as efficiently
right.
as they have.
But they have. And so I think that gives a lot of energy right now. Now, it's a long ways till November, and you never say never. Nobody thought Trump was going to win in 2016.
I did.
But I do think that, the recipe is there for her to be successful. Yeah. And we'll see how this all plays out. I agree with you. I think if people are looking honestly at the two candidates, and they're looking on some of these issues that were dragging Biden down, and now they're looking at Vice President Harris, I think that works in her favor. We got another question for you about party politics and the future of party politics here in the United States. Do you think that this two-party system is going to be sustainable after, what has become this just 21st century craziness of electoral politics in the country? Is there really the potential? We get students all the time asking us that. Is there potential for a third party to emerge, to become competitive? Or are we really just going to be stuck with, we got Republicans and Democrats and that's your choice?
No. Let me just tell you this. Let me just spin out a few scenarios. I think that if Democrats win the presidency this time around, what you're going to see is a coalition emerge that's going to span from Elizabeth Cheney to Noam Chomsky, You're going to see people on the left, the responsible left, the people who actually do vote for who they think is the best person, as opposed to some folks who are just on some lunatic fringe. And you're going to see center right people, and so that coalition is going to sort of exist a little bit. Then to the right of Cheney, you're going to have a fracturing of the Republican Party, because the National Republican Party has become a shadow of itself, yielding space to things like the Heritage Foundation, Cato Institute, others. Those folks play a more prominent role in Republican Party politics than the Republican Party does. And then a lot of state parties, and what I'm afraid of is that, and so you're going to have some people who are right of Cheney just going to say to themselves, we can't win an election unless we figure out what's in front of us. And what is that going to mean? That's going to mean a few things. That's going to mean some groups in that coalition are going to go even further right. Some groups are going to come to their senses and say, we lost, we're going to come back. But I think there's at least some chance that you have some folks saying, I mean, look at the 1960s. George Wallace ended up starting his own party, right? There were some people who just found themselves with no party. But then there's another problem that's going to emerge. And that is the Democrats and the Republican Party, in my view, have failed to answer certain fundamental questions for American people. And that is that, look, we call ourselves the land of opportunity, right? The land of opportunity. And yet, statistically, there are several European countries where your chance of intergenerational mobility is higher than the United States. If you're a poor kid born in Sweden, you have a better chance becoming a millionaire there than you do in the United States being a poor kid. Norway, too. Denmark, too. And maybe even more. And so the United States has got to squarely look at the fact that our income inequality is freezing economic relations, and where the rich, no matter how dumb they are, will grow up and live and die rich, and the poor will never escape their situation. And what do we know? We know that, like, you look at Felicity Huffman. Remember that lady, that actress who got in all that trouble because even though she was rich, she still couldn't get her kid into Stanford, so they bribed all those people? Remember that? That is an ugly sign if you want to have a society based on competitive merit. If you look at that phenomenon, what you're seeing is that my kid, heads, she wins, tails, your kid loses, right? Because what they're saying is a poor kid can't have a shot. This is regardless of race, right? What they're saying is, okay, we'll take only your A students, but your B students can never rise above their station. And our rich kids who are D students, they're going to go to Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. Oh, and by the way, we got rid of affirmative action for all you little brown people, but we're going to keep legacy for all of us, right? I mean, I wonder what's going to happen when white working class people learn that if your dad and mom went to Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, you get to go there too, even if you're not a very good student. Because that's the fact right now. That's what legacy is. That's affirmative action for wealthy people. That's what it is. And I don't think very many people really realize that. Because my thought is, why are you upset about some brown kid who's a B student getting into Harvard, but you're fine with some D student who's a country clubber getting into Harvard, all because their dad went there? And so there's this issue of lack of opportunity, frozen economic relations. People are going to get real tired of that, man. And I think that's going to be something that some party is going to say, we're ready to respond to that need. But I will say that, you're going to see some reconfiguring, because the people right of Liz Cheney are going to be homeless politically, and the people who are going to speak to real economic populism, economic opportunity. In Minnesota, we've had 700 people lose their dairy farms since 2018. these are farms that people had in their family for 3-4 generations. Those people are kind of mad about that, you know.
I would imagine, yeah.
You know, there's people who, for example, used to own a family store in a small town. Now we've seen the family dollarization of the independent small store across America. Across America, you don't see independent stores anymore. You see Casey's and you see Family Dollar. This is, and they can and that independent family store cannot possibly sell milk for what those big giant chains can sell it for. And so my point is, we're seeing an economic gap because we tell people if you work hard, you can make it. But a lot of people are saying, I work hard every day and I cannot make it because my dad he worked in this plant and my mom worked at the local school. Well, the school is shut down and the plant has moved to Mexico. What in the world am I supposed to do? And this country told me that if I worked hard, I could make it. And everybody's not going to be valedictorian. Because I will admit that if you're valedictorian, yes, you can go to Stanford. But what if you're just a good student but not valedictorian? Then what's there for you? I think that this nation has got to figure out how to create an economy where more people can be successful. So you look at the 1950s. One person could feed a family of 4. One person could feed a family of 4. Now, did we have Jim Crow? Yes, we did. Could a woman get a credit card in her own name? No, she couldn't. If you were gay, would you let anybody know about it? Absolutely not, because you'd probably lose your job. So I don't want to go back to 1950s America sociologically, but I think America in 1950 economically did create a broader space for more people to have a prosperous lifestyle. And we've got to figure out how to get there.
I wonder, do you have any comment on this? James is our local economic expert.
No, listen. We invited Attorney General Ellison on here to hear from him, not for me to opine.
I mean, I agree.
I think I do think when people bring up the 1950s economically, they tend to forget that the entire environment was different than what it is now, and so. But no, I am not. I'm not here to do anything but to hear from the Attorney General today.
Good boy.
I'm going to be on my best behavior today.
But James, let me just push you a little bit, friend. You know, of course, the economy was different back then. We were an auto, steel, economy. We had, we imported a lot less, agricultural things. Now we're much more of a service economy, and things are manufactured abroad and often bought here, and we're much more of a tech economy and information. I mean, clearly the shape of the economy has changed, but you can't tell me that the opportunity for economic success is not a problem in America today. And look, the average. So what happened? People got into unions. Right now, we're seeing a resurgence in the union movement. Back then, now another change in the economy is you're seeing not going to the future. You're seeing going back to the turn of the century, and not the last one, but the one before that, because you got the rise of the gig economy, where they say your car, your gas, your repair, but we'll cut you off a few bucks if you drive this person from here to there, or if you bring this meal from here to there. But it's a lot like a piecework economy, if you ask me, than it is an advanced, modern, technological economy, because you're foisting the entire risk and expense of production onto the individual person, right? So anyway, I love talking economics. It's one of my favorite topics. I have organized my entire service as Attorney General around prosperity for more people. My slogan to my staff, which I repeat multiple times a day, is we're here to help people afford their lives and live with dignity, safety, and respect. I'll tell you, in the 1950s, we had much more antitrust enforcement than we do. Now we have an economy where the top producers of any industry number in maybe one or two or three. Pork, broiler chicken, turkey, hotels, beer, cold cereal, you name it, internet search engines, you name it. Our economy is dominated by enormous, big, gigantic companies. When this happened to us in the 1890s, we passed the Sherman Act. When there was only one or two people who owned the railroad, we passed the Sherman Act. One or two steel producers, we passed the Sherman Act. One or two oil producers, Standard Oil, we passed laws to say, hey, wait a minute, there's got to be competition. You cannot use your dominant position to the disadvantage of consumers and the competition. Today, we're just now getting back into that. So anyway, I'll leave it right there. I'll say whether you want to buy insulin or whether you want to buy, I don't know, painkillers. We have highly monopolized markets nowadays, and this has undermined competition for price and on product differentiation, and it has stagnated wages. So, James, you sure you don't want to talk economics with me? Because it's my favorite topic.
We will have to set up a whole separate episode for this.
We will have to do that because
I'm excited about this.
We would have a good, robust. We would have a good, robust conversation.
Oh my God!
So now I got to come back.
I love it. Yes, I just heard your soul give a shout out to Elizabeth Warren just then. I'm just saying.
Yep. But I mean, it's neither right nor left. I mean, remember we were talking about what's the shape. How will party politics change? Part of it will be some interest group will emerge to meet the need of a highly monopolized economy where people are using market power to the disadvantage of consumers, workers, and their competition and the environment. I believe that is going to happen.
It feels to me like you're predicting a new party.
Could be, but it's hard to make a new party. You could remake the old party. Back in the 40s and even before, the Democrats were, at least in the southern part of the Democrats, were the racist party. This was the party fighting for segregation. Strom Thurmond, Senator Ellison. These were the people who were upholding segregation. And the northern part of the Democratic Party, Roosevelt, Hubert Humphrey, people like that, they were more economic progressives. But remember, a lot of the legislation was passed that was progressive legislation, but it was passed to the exclusion of African Americans. Social Security excluded domestic workers and ag workers. Now, who was cleaning up houses and who was in the field, right? So that was how the way certain home loan and were redlined with FHA regulations and things like that. Laws were written for the working class, but to the exclusion of Black and brown people. So that's why Social Security started out that way. That's how, that's why you had, say, for even the GI Bill was administered at the state level. So Michigan might make sure that you could have non-racial benefits distributed, but Mississippi would not. You know what I mean? So that's why the shape of a lot of things was as it was in those days. I believe in the time we're living now. I mean, and so I'll just continue that thought. So once Hubert H. Humphrey passed that civil rights plank, the Dixiecrats walked out of the Democratic Party. They messed around for a few years, but within 20 years, they were Republicans. That's a fact.
You better tell these kids that Kanye was wrong, children. Attorney General Keith Ellison said it right here. Kanye West was wrong about the parties.
Well, Kanye West couldn't find his backside with two hands in a mouth.
Oh, I love you, Attorney General.
Other than making a danceable song, the man has no qualifications for anything at all. And so I'll just say that, yes, the Dixiecrats were Democrats and they were the segregationists, but they left the party in about 48 and have been gone ever since. And in 1960, why did Nixon beat Johnson? Because they figured out the Southern strategy to lure those homeless ex-Democrats back into the Republican Party. That is the fact of the matter.
Yeah. We love communication that goes both ways, not just you listening to us pontificate. We would love to hear from our audience. If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to contact us about possibly being a guest on the show, please email notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu. So this conversation has been vast and rich and wonderful. So I need to ask you, I would be remiss as a social movement researcher, in fact, and somebody who studied the origins of Black Lives Matter, to allow you to not comment, certainly, on your prosecution of the cops who killed George Floyd. And so I was very curious. That case obviously dominated quite a bit of the conversation, as it was happening, obviously the protests that followed. And then, of course, you being, the state prosecuting, very, very interesting. And so I'm curious, what did you learn as a prosecutor and as a Black man in America from that trial or case?
One of the things that I learned is that, number one, people really do want equal justice under the law. And while people respect police, they really do. They don't respect police officers who are crooked, who commit criminal acts, and they are fine with those people being tried and convicted. It's not true that police are necessarily immune no matter what bad conduct they engage in. People want these officers tried, and for many reasons, one of which is to protect the good cops. There's got to be a difference between the officers who put their lives on the line to protect us every single day and Derek Chauvin. There's got to be a difference between officers who would do anything, who would risk their lives to save people and protect people, and this guy, Grayson, who just shot this poor woman in the face the other day in Springfield, Illinois, Sonia Massey. And if you say no cops will ever be held accountable no matter what they do, what you're really saying is that the valiant officer who breaks his neck and does everything he can or she can to be a wonderful officer and uphold the law is no different from these people, because none of them have to be held accountable under the law. So I would say that's one reason. The other reason is, I'll tell you, is that unless you prosecute bad police, you are going to see a crime problem go up in your city. Why? Because police can't be effective without community cooperation. So if I'm living in the neighborhood and I know that just some cop just shot Miss Sonia Massey in the face, and he's not being held accountable, am I going to call 911 if I hear a problem? Am I going to seek out help if I think that the police are going to make things worse? The answer is obviously no. So the point is, you need to prosecute bad cops, criminal cops, in order to maintain trust and good faith with community. So I would tell you that those are some things that I learned. I also learned that ordinary people are wonderful. And it was those people standing on the corner of 38th and Chicago Avenue in Minneapolis who used their voices to call for George Floyd's life. And when they couldn't, they took out their video cameras on their phones and they took pictures of it. And when that didn't work, they came back a year later to testify against that officer. And I just remind people, Darnella Frazier was a 17-year-old Black girl, but Melissa Funari was a 17-year-old white girl. That, Charles McMillan was a 61-year-old Black man, but Genevieve Hansen was a 27-year-old white female firefighter. The people who stood up and spoke up for George Floyd were a mixed race group. And so don't think that, that this was some, racist, don't think that this is something that fits into some neat category of racial politics. It actually doesn't, Now, I would argue if George Floyd was a white neurologist in the nice neighborhood, the police would never have handled him that way. And everybody in America knows this, whether they admit it or not. On the other hand, Derek Chauvin never said anything overtly racist to George Floyd. So the situation was racialized But Derek Chauvin's individual motivation probably was not racial animosity. It probably had a lot more to do with, I'm the police, you're not, and screw you. I'm going to do what I want. It was more basic than some ideology, some anti-Black ideology. It was humans' hubris. It was arrogance. It was the sense that I am in charge and you are not, and I'm going to do what I want, and I'm not getting off him because you told me to get off of him. I'm not obeying you. Now, if he would have listened to the crowd, he wouldn't be doing 22 years right now. But that really is how it all boils down. I will tell you that there's been some dishonest propaganda that has come out recently. There was a film called The Fall of Minneapolis, which actually claims that George Floyd was not killed by Derek Chauvin. My friends, if you've seen this, I hate even to mention it, but it is a lie from front to back. And if you have any doubt about what happened, go on YouTube and just watch the testimony of Dr. Martin Tobin, who is a world-renowned pulmonologist, who explained in detail exactly the mechanism of death. And if you go to the other doctor who was a cardiologist who explained in detail that it was not George Floyd's heart that gave out, it was low oxygen. These are trained experts in medicine who explained in detail how George Floyd was murdered. What happened, it wasn't just the knee on the neck. It was also the officer, Dr. J. Alexander King, who was pushing his back into the concrete, who was stopping the bellow mechanism of your lungs. And your lungs have to breathe. When your lungs go in and out, your lungs oxygenate your blood. But when they can't move, they can't oxygenate your blood. And he died from low oxygen. That is why he died. And Dr. Tobin said anybody would have been killed in a similar circumstance. So I just add that because I know that some false propaganda has been running around the internet. Surprise, surprise. And I just urge people to believe your eyes. What you saw, in fact, you did see. And if you want to watch the testimony of Dr. Tobin and Dr. Rich, it's there and available for you.
Real quickly, before we have to wrap up, I did have a question. You were talking about holding police officers accountable.
Right.
What's your take on qualified immunity? And is that something that has become a shield for bad actors who are police officers rather than a mechanism for allowing us to hold them accountable?
You know what? I really think that, well, first of all, let's talk about what is qualified immunity, because it's not a well understood term. I know about it because before I was ever the Attorney General, I was a lawyer, and I sued government people, and they would often invoke qualified immunity. Qualified immunity is basically a civil doctrine. It doesn't apply to us in the criminal space. So when I prosecuted Derek Chauvin, you never heard anything about qualified immunity because that is a civil doctrine. It's a doctrine for money, not liberty, right? So there you go. But it's a doctrine that protects police officers and other government officials, not just police officers, from liability for constitutional violations, unless the right that the officer violated was, quote, clearly established, unquote, at the time. And so what does clearly established really mean? Well, it means that there are other cases on point that would have put the officer on notice. Now, the reason I think qualified immunity is horse crap is because your administrative rules tell you don't do it. The law, the statutes of the state that you live in say don't do it. Federal laws say don't do it. You know, the rules of your professional ethics say don't do it. Supreme Court decisions say don't do it, and yet it's not clearly established until, I don't know, there's a case exactly on point describing the precise facts. It's just a way to stop people from being accountable for their bad behavior. And the qualified immunity, yeah, it stops individual plaintiffs from recovering compensation for the violation of their rights. But the other thing it does is it stops the reforms that would happen if officers had to face that civil liability. And now let me just tell you this. I am not one. I mean, I have dismissed cases and declined prosecutions when officers were charged with or people thought they did something wrong. But I think that they have enough notice if their administrative employment policies say don't do certain things, if their training stuff says don't do certain things, if the law says don't do certain things, then you shouldn't do them things. And if you do them, maybe you should face liability. And what qualified immunity says, well, yeah, but they have to be clearly established. Well, that is a term that basically means there has to be other cases preceding those, that have established this on those same facts. And it stops the reform process, and it makes everything a little worse than it would be. And part of one of the chapters in my book is on how judges contribute to police brutality because of certain things like qualified immunity.
Our guest today has been Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison. We've had a wonderful conversation. We want to thank you for being so gracious with your time. And we also need to not only is he Attorney General, not only has he been a member of Congress, but he's also an author. And he wrote the book Break the Wheel, which discusses police violence. And we would encourage everybody to check that out as well. Attorney General Ellison, thank you so much for being with us today.
So let me just say, James and Professor Stacy, it's been a wonderful talking to y'all. I look forward to talking with y'all again soon. And I gotta tell you, one of the biggest problems facing our society today, one of the biggest problems, is the difficulty in the average person being able to achieve prosperity of any color. It's driving a lot of the policies we have, and it's driving a lot of political anger. And I think if we open doors of opportunity for Americans of all strata, if we say that being a plumber is just as good as being a lawyer, and maybe more valuable to society, and you should have people paid properly, then I think that we'll solve a lot of the political problems we have. But thank you all for having me.
Yeah, you have been fantastic. I am just beyond over the moon.
And we want to remind our listeners,
democracy is not a spectator sport.
We'll see everyone next time.
All right.
Hey everyone, this is Deborah, the resident Gen Z member of the Not My Generation podcast family. Not My Generation is produced in the Possibilities Inc. studio. This episode was produced by Santiago Ramones. It was edited by Santiago Ramones. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. Send a voice memo to notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu and you could hear your voice on an upcoming episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the podcast with others. You can check out previous episodes on any podcast app and on our podcast website at notmygeneration.captivate.fm, where we also provide our show notes. And remember, you can follow Not My Generation on X, formerly known as Twitter, at NMG Podcast, and on Facebook at Not My Generation Podcast. We look forward to interacting with you soon.